Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you all so much. We have folks joining us from all over. This is great. Thank you all for being with us today. Hi, and welcome to NMWA xChange, a spinoff of the award-winning pandemic live stream series, BMA NMWA. I'm Addie Gayoso, NMWA's senior educator, and I want to just welcome everyone who's joining the room right now. Please do feel free to add your name and where you're calling from in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that. Thank you all for being with us today. Today's penultimate episode of NMWA xChange is CART captioned. Thanks to Joyful Signing and our live captioner, Joy Horton, for making this possible. To see live captions, just click on the CC button in your Zoom ribbon or the More button if you don't see the CC button. Feel free, please, to add your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will do our best to address them today. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this program and the format, each month, hosts from NMWA are joined by special guests to center women creatives. We consider topics relevant to our world and offer insight into collaborations NMWA is fostering while its building is closed for renovation. During this time of change, we are excited to exchange ideas with our guests and viewers. In our last episode, we spoke with the National Gallery of Ireland's curator, Aoife Brady, whose exhibition on the Italian Renaissance painter Lavinia Fontana has just opened. And if you happen to be going to Ireland, specifically Dublin, the exhibition is on view until August 27th. There's a lot of great resources on the website as well if you can't make it to Dublin. And as always, please feel free to check out our past NMWA xChange episodes, which are on YouTube, and I will share the link momentarily in the chat. And with that, I want to introduce my co-host, NMWA's senior curator, Jenny Trainer. Hey, Jenny.
Hello, hi everyone. I'm very excited to be joining you from my new office in the museum. It's so exciting. We are moving back in, staging it, getting everything ready to reopen in October. It's really exciting. Still some work going on. You can see I have my very own hard hat in the background there. We all have one. So today we are really in for a treat because we are going to be talking about one of the exhibitions that will be on view when we reopen in October. And that exhibition is called Holding Ground, and it is an exhibition of specially commissioned artist books for the reopening. So to tell us a little bit more about the exhibition, we are joined by a number of folks, and I'm going to introduce them very briefly and then turn it over to them. So today we are joined by Elizabeth Adjoa, who is our director of the Library and Research Center. Hello, Elizabeth. We are joined by Lynora Williams, the former director of NMWA's Library and Research Center and the curator of this exhibition. And then we are really lucky to have two fantastic artists with us, Colette Fu and Adjoa Burrowes. Hello to all of you. I am going to turn it over to Elizabeth. And if you could tell us, Elizabeth, what's to come for NMWA's Library and Archives upon our reopening and what this show is all about.
Great. Thank you, Jenny, so much. I just want to come here and introduce myself to those who might have never seen me before. My name is Elizabeth Adjoa, and I'm the current director of the Betty Boyd Dietrich Library and Research Center here at NMWA. For those who need a little bit more of a visual description of what I look like, I am a brown-skinned woman with a black kind of meshy flurry top on. I have a large twists in my hair and gold dangly earrings. I'm so excited to be here. One, to tell you all that library staff is currently working hard to prepare the library for reopening. As you can imagine, there's over 20,000 books and print materials now that we're trying to get ready, along with rare archival materials from the likes of Judy Chicago and Frida Kahlo, and of course, our very popular artist book collection. So it's a daunting task to get it ready, but I am so excited for everyone to see the space once we reopen. That said, I am so thrilled to hear more from Adjoa and Colette about their works in this exhibition. And I have the pleasure of introducing the curator of Holding Ground, Lynora Williams. Lynora has been a mentor and an inspiration to me, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you and show my appreciation and gratitude for her. She's really helped me in this part of my career, and I just wanted to take a moment to say that and also tell you a little bit about her. She was the former director of the library here, but prior to joining NMWA, she served as the librarian at the Textile Museum at George Washington University. During her time as library director at NMWA, she curated several book arts exhibitions, which included Power in My Hand, which explored the collaborations between book artists and poets. She curated DMV Color, which was also a very popular exhibition, which highlighted women book artists of color who had ties to the DC, Maryland, and Virginia region. And then more recently, Julie Chen, True to Life, an exhibition that featured over Julie's works from over her 30+ year career. And now Lynora returns as guest curator for Holding Ground, and we get to hear more about it. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Lynora. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. You're so sweet. Thank you very much. And thanks, Jenny and Addie, for giving us this chance to talk about Holding Ground, which we're really excited to see come together. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in. I think I'm going to try to be very quick because I really want you to hear from Colette and Adjoa. But before we get started, I think it's just useful to have a little general conversation about artist books. And I think if we could go to the next slide. The basic question is, what is an artist book? So many people think they may know what an artist book is, but they don't. It's a little challenging. I want to say a couple caveats. One is, I'm probably not the most equipped person in this Zoom room to say what an artist book is. We have some artists here who have been immersed in the world of artist books for decades. And so I would say, please chime in on the chat. The second thing is that the definition of an artist book is really, I won't say contested because I think that's a bit strong, but I will say that many people bring their own definitions to the discussion. I like to try to make it simple. And so I tend to feel comfortable with the definition of an artist book as a work of art that takes the form and function of a book as its inspiration. That's a definition I feel most comfortable with. And actually, I could share with you that definition a little more expanded. I know this is a definition used by the Smithsonian Institution libraries. And they say an artist book is a medium of artistic expression that uses the form or function of book as inspiration. It is the artistic initiative seen in the illustration, choice of materials, creation process, layout, and design that makes it an art object. A book that only contains text is simply a book. Even if authored by an artist, it would be a book that belongs in a bookstore or on the shelves of the library. So there you have it. And as I said, feel free to add your own nuances to that. NMWA has been collecting books since its founding in 1987, actually probably before it was even a formal museum. And much of the collection was gathered by Christina Wasserman, who's the author of the book, The Book is Art. And she was the founding librarian at NMWA. And then she became the curator of book arts. So under her stewardship, the museum amassed a collection of about 1,000 artist books under her stewardship and in subsequent years. So it's really one of the largest collection of artist books strictly by women that's out there. So naturally, since we have this long history of collecting artist books, we thought it would be awesome to commission new works to add to the collection and to celebrate the reopening of the museum after the renovation. So what we did was we asked 9 artists to create works that spoke to, in some way, NMWA's role as an advocate for women in the arts. And what I'd like to do is just very quickly share with you what we received as part of this exhibition. We had asked 9 women to contribute. 8 of those women are women of color. And I think by looking at their works, you can just see the immense variety that you can find in the world of artist books. It is just, to me, stunning, you know, how different the books are in structure, in content, in style. It's very exciting. So the artists that we asked to participate are Alyssa Banks, Adjoa, who's here, Julie Chen, Suzanne Coley, eBay Crawley, Marie Carmen Solis, Colette is here, Carrie, who's I know in the chat with us, and Maria Veronica San Martin. And I hope I didn't forget anybody. So what I'm going to do is just give you all a very quick sneak peek, because this is Colette and Adjoa's time, as I said, but I thought you might want to just very quickly see what the works are. So we could just go to the next slide. I think Alyssa's here too.
She is, yeah.
Yay.
Thanks for joining us, Alyssa.
Alyssa is from Dallas, and this is her work, History of a People. It's actually in 2 parts. As you can see on the left-hand side, this is the cover, so it goes on top of her work. And those little things on the top there are actually vials of perfume scents. So it's just amazing. And her work kind of traces the experience, the African-American experience from the time of enslavement to today. So we could go to the next slide. This is Julie Chen's contribution, Many Hands. And she did a meditation on National Museum of Women in the Arts as both an advocate and a repository. So one side of this work, which is a flexagon, it opens up, folds into itself and then opens up. And she has text on both sides referencing those 2 aspects of a National Museum of Women in the Arts. And you can't see it here, but she included a beaded necklace from a Zimbabwean beading collective. It's really 3 pieces of work. All these books would take me 45 minutes to explain in full, but we'll just keep moving. This is Suzanne Coley's book. And so you probably can't tell from this image, but in its form, it's probably more traditional. Because it opens up and has traditional pages. These are all handcrafted flowers for the cover that she made, because she said that NMWA is a place where art is in bloom. And she also wanted to honor, I think, her mother and some other relatives who worked in the garment industry, and part of their work was crafting flowers for embellishment for fashion. We can go to the next one. This is eBay Crawley's book, Dwelling for Her Story. This is all handmade paper that she did a lot of stitching on and created obviously a dwelling, a home structure. So again, thinking about NMWA as the repository or the home for women's art, but also thinking about African-American women's history and resilience, and a place for transmitting that history. eBay is from Virginia. Here's Carrie's piece, which I've just found to be very powerful. It's called Boiling Points. Again, in its structure, a little bit more traditional than a house. And what Carrie did was she included in her work the names of all the women who had worked in the Museum of Women in the Arts collection in 2023. And when you see the book, you see that that's a lot of names. And so it smacks right in the face of the fact that women's artwork is still undervalued and underappreciated. So she included these quotations and some facts about women in the art world. And she said that these observations stand as boiling points in the tension between the reality of women's art and the appreciation of women's art. This is Maria Veronica San Martin's work. Maria is originally from Chile, and much of her work, including this one, stands in memory of lives lost during the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet, which began in 1973. And here she's included sand from the Chilean desert, where it's believed that many victims of that dictatorship were buried. And this book is really kind of a visual companion to a dance, folkloric dance that the women, the mothers of the disappeared, would do in the desert as they searched for their loved ones. And we have one more, I think. This is Marie Carmen Solis. She's a young artist. She just graduated a couple of years ago from the Corcoran School of Arts and Design. She's from Los Angeles, and after school she returned to Los Angeles. And here you can see she made a book that is a replica of the building. So we kind of love that. And in it, she put images of some of the favorite artworks that you can find in our collection. So I think that's the last one. And Colette and Adjoa will give you a more in-depth view of their works. But I hope everyone will come and see all the reopening exhibitions when October rolls around.
Thanks, Lynora, and thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate getting more of an understanding of the show and the context that surrounded it. And I'm really excited to talk to Colette and Adjoa today. I'm so excited to learn more about their individual creative processes and how they came up with the idea and created the book for this particular exhibition. But before I do that, I want to throw it to Adjoa and then Colette just to talk a little bit about your sort of relationships overall with the National Museum of Women in the Arts over time. And I will just say personally, I've had the great pleasure of sort of working with Colette and Adjoa in various educational contexts for adult audiences as well as for school and teacher audiences. But if you wouldn't mind, I'll let you start, Adjoa, if you want to talk a little bit about your relationship with the museum over time.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, my relationship with NMWA started in 2004. as a visiting artist with NMWA's Arts, Books, and Creativity program. And then in 2005 with the Bridging Communities Partnership with DC area schools, which was really very, very cool. Each student in the Bridging Communities project produced an artist book that culminated in an exhibition in the museum's education gallery. And with every workshop that I led with my artist books, and including my children's book, Grandma's Purple Flowers. And I referenced many contemporary women artists during my workshops. And this is one of the books, Grandma's Purple Flowers, and an illustration from it. And you'll see how I use this as a launching pad for my new book for the museum.
Yeah, thanks, Adjoa. Before we look at your work, I want to just talk a little bit to Colette about her own sort of experience with the museum over time. Hey, Colette, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's such a pleasure to be with you today, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this celebratory exhibition. About 10 years ago, I asked my friend and colleague, Beatrice Coron, who's also, the fabulous paper cut artist that's also in your collection, if she knew of any librarians that I could share my work with. She generously shared the contact information for Christina Wasserman, your founding librarian and curator. And so I sent Christina a brief email and had some photos attached. And she mentioned if I was ever in the area, she might take a look at my books. So of course, the next trip I took down to Roanoke to visit my parents who lived there at the time. I stopped by DC and made arrangements to meet Christina. I filled a very large suitcase with my pop-up books and rolled it into the library. I remember she was sitting there in the library with a really serious face. And while standing a few feet from her, I opened a book and her eyes lit up and then she smiled. And then soon after, I was invited to speak as a guest lecturer and teach a workshop. I also participated in your virtual educator summer camp with Addie. And then a few later was invited for a solo show, which was Christina's last exhibition before retiring. And we still keep in touch. In fact, I saw her earlier this year in Miami at the Tropic Bound Artist Fair, and also had the pleasure of meeting Elizabeth there too.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing a little bit more about your relationship over time with the museum. So I want to throw it to Adjoa again. So, but actually before we start, can we look at the next slide? So what's interesting about Adjoa's book and Colette's book is they both draw connections to specific objects in the museum's collection. And on the left, we see an image by Alma Woodsey Thomas, and on the right, we see a still life by Clara Paters. And I'm curious, Adjoa, if you want to talk a little bit about sort of what inspired you about Thomas and her work, and then we can show some images of your own book to sort of provide more context. And then Colette will circle back with you about your interest in Clara Paters. Thanks.
Well, my artist book, I wanted to create this conversation between Alma Thomas's work and my books. And, I was intrigued by Alma Thomas because she used references from her garden a lot in her work. I like the fact that she was an abstract artist, that even though she was born in Georgia, she made Washington, D.C. her home. I just felt like it was really appropriate for me to, look at her work and try to make that connection. So like my book called Blossom Again is based on my children's book, my published children's book, Grandma's Purple Flowers. And that book is a celebration of the seasons. And so what I tried to do is, make that connection between that and Alma Thomas's work. So if you look at this image, you'll see these circular discs. And these pieces were created as a direct connection to Alma Thomas's work. I tried to channel her in those pieces. And those pieces were created using a silkscreen technique. Right. And then, because this is an altered book, I deconstructed it. And that's that's the really cool thing about altered books is you can take something and remake it into some other form. So originally, of course, the published book is two-dimensional, and I was very excited to transform it into a three-dimensional form.
I love that. I think we have a couple of details that are really great to look at too. Let's take a look at the next slides.
The image on the left kind of shows you the silkscreen pieces that were done in response to Miss Thomas's work.
It's really beautiful. Thank you. And it looks like an altered book, for those of you who don't know, is sort of repurposing a book and sort of using the cover, but also the pages on the inside and transforming it. And so it looks like you've created some really interesting sort of almost like ribbons in forms and fashions, as well as little fans or almost like smaller accordion books as well. This is really beautiful. And it almost looks like it's blossoming, Adjoa.
Yeah, that's why, I ended up, I really searched for an appropriate name for it, and it just slapped me in the face at one point, blossom again, because I made it from a book that was published like 20 years ago. And the thing about altered books is that it gives it a chance to live again. And so the book lives again in a different form.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Colette, do you want to talk a little bit about your work and also your inspiration, who is Clara Peters? And I just want to mention this is one of several works in our collection by Colette Fu. We just wanted to share an example of her amazing pop-ups that intrigued Christina Wasserman that day in the library. But I'll pass it off to you, Colette, if you want to talk a little bit about your book for this exhibition, as well as your inspiration.
So I wanted to create something that was related to the mission and the founding of the museum. And after looking through the website and the Broad Streets library blog, I learned about the story of how the museum got started. And so that during a trip to Europe in the 1970s, Wilhelmina Cole Holliday, the museum's founder, and her husband, Wallace Holliday, fell in love with the work of Flemish painter Clara Peters. But upon returning home, they were unable to find any information about Peters or any other women's art in Jansen's History of Art book, the main art history textbook of the time. They began to focus their collection on female artists. And so when I saw the images of the two paintings in your collection, and I saw that large bouquet of flowers, I immediately could see it three-dimensional. And I also, looking back further, I learned that Mrs. Holliday developed her appreciation of art through her grandmother. And then the quote that I read during an interview she had with the Washington Post, she said, "As a little girl, I would say, 'Look, Grandma, isn't that flower beautiful?' And Grandma would reply, 'Yes, dear, but why? Is it the color you find beautiful, the shape, the smell? Does it remind you of something else beautiful?' So I found a 1970 copy of The History of Art and incorporated the cover and select pages from inside, including the Flemish art section in which Peters should have been part of. And then also incorporated an image from Mrs. Holliday's journal showing notes about her planning for the museum. That's it.
Thank you, Colette. Well, no, thank you so much. I was just thinking, Ginny probably can speak more to this. I know that the Jansen, we always give Jansen a bad name at NMWA, but there were no women artists included in Jansen until I think that it was the year that NMWA actually opened its doors for the first time. Is that right, Ginny?
Yeah, 1987, I think, was the first. I forget which edition of Jansen it was. that included women. I think the first ever edition of Jansen was 1964 or 67, something like that, which, to put that in perspective, was less than 50 years, I think, after Mary Cassatt died. And she wasn't even in it. So it's kind of hard to imagine, but yeah, I mean, within all of our lifetimes, right? Like, you know, Jansen didn't have any women, and now they're doing a really good job of including women. So.
And I really love that Colette's sort of taken all of the guts of Jansen, and certainly in a volume or an issue that didn't include the work of women and sort of transforming it. So Colette, I also want to ask, so Clara Peters is known, though not in our works, we have 2 paintings by Clara Peters, but she often incorporated her own self-portrait in her books in really minuscule ways. And did that inspire your book at all?
Oh yeah, so I wanted this to be, you know, more about her, but having learned that she included her reflections in her work, I did put my own reflection in a little tiny area on the vase. And in some of the work, she's holding a paintbrush and a palette. So I'm holding a pair of scissors.
I love that detail. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was hoping we had a closer up shot of that, but I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but I'm kind of circling where that self-portrait of Colette is.
This is just a tease, so folks will have to actually come and see these books in person and take a close look at Adjoa's beautiful bouquet, as well as try to find this the self-portrait here of Colette. This is great. Thank you all so much for sharing. Ginny, do you have any questions for Colette or for Adjoa?
Oh gosh, I mean, I have so many questions about so many things at the moment. But I'm so thrilled that Lynora has put together this great slate of book artists for this one of our reopening exhibitions, because this collection is so important to NMWA, and really something that we're known for. And so I think it's really nice to be able to showcase that upon our reopening to the public. And they're just fun too. They're fun to look at. They're fun to explore. You know, it's great that we have all these digital tools nowadays, and we can do a lot of things online, but you know, coming in person and looking at these things IRL, as the kids say, is really just an amazing experience. So I hope that for our visitors who are tuning in today, if they can come and visit us after our reopening, October 21st, mark your calendars, and take a look at it, and all of the other great programming that we have on tap for the reopening.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask Adjoa and Colette if they're going to be joining us for the reopening. Will you be around? Awesome. I'm seeing Colette will be here.
Yes,
Adjoa?
definitely.
Awesome. Well, this will be an opportunity for our attendees today to possibly meet you and chat with you. And I can encourage Jenny. I think there's something so like wonderful and tangible about artist books, not only because they're amazing works of art, but also because we all have a connection to the physicality of books. And so I'm really excited to see these in person. I'm curious too, Adjoa, what are you working on now that you've finished this book? What's next for you?
You know, I'm a mixed media artist and creating more three-dimensional pieces, transforming 2D prints and paintings into 3D form. Just recently came back from New York. I had some pieces exhibited at a gallery in the East Village.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. That's great. And Colette, what have you been working on?
I'm working on 3 large pop-up books for different organizations that will open next year. And one will be room sized, and another one will hopefully have like a hand crank, so that's my solution for letting visitors interact with the work but not have to touch the actual work. Yeah, so they're all a little bit different than my previous work. Like,
That sounds really cool. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I actually shared, for everyone who's in the room, I've shared both Adjoa's website as well as Colette, so you can kind of take a look to see what they're working on and sort of what's next for them. And I want to throw it back to everyone who's with us today. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. And I didn't know if Lynora, you had anything else you wanted to share with us. I'm hoping you'll be around for the reopening as well.
I will, looking forward to it. I think, the one thing I wanted to say about these books is, I mentioned earlier how different they all are from one another, and I hope you could see that just from the images. But the thing that they all really do is speak to that tension of that women experience in trying to make art, and the tension between the public and the private. And so to me, it's just very fascinating how each of the artists represented that in a different way. I'll be very interested in others who visit and whether they see that thread running through the books in the same way that I experienced it as I started to see the books.
And I'm curious, Lynora, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you, we talked about this in our initial conversation, but how did you select the artists that are incorporated in this particular exhibition of artist books?
It wasn't easy. I really just wanted a lot of diversity, and I don't mean that in the buzzwordy sense, but I wanted as much as possible geographic diversity. Of course, as I mentioned, we have mostly women of color, and some of the artists had participated in our DMV color show. I wanted seasoned artists and newer emerging artists. That was important to me, because I feel like for people just starting out in the world of book arts, it's hard for them to get their works exhibited and to share their works with a broader audience. That's a real challenge. So that's one reason why we were very glad to have Marie Carmen's work as one of our 9. So those were kind of the main issues. I didn't look so much at the structural issues, like as you saw, there's a real difference in the structural approach of the 9 artists, but that was not a conscious effort on my part.
Thanks, Lynora. Yeah, actually, I wanted to throw that made me think of something to ask Adjoa and Colette. When you were approached to do this work, were there any sort of restrictions that were presented to you, or any sort of parameters?
Was that well, early we had to come up with the dimensions of it, and that was a little challenging because I hadn't designed it yet. So it was working backwards in a way, but I mean, it all turned out in the end.
Thanks, Adjoa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, size was also something that came up with me, as I normally like to make very large things, especially if they're unique. But I wanted to use the cover of the Jansen book. So that was about, I guess, 11 by 14. So on the small side.
I know Colette often works very large. She talked a little bit about some of her current projects, and if you go to her website, you can also see a pop-up she created where you're actually in the pop-up itself. So I know you like to work big, so it's kind of interesting to see working on a slightly smaller scale as well. So that's great. Thank you all so much for sharing. Ginny, shall we talk a little bit about, we don't have any questions in the chat or in the Q&A yet, so feel free to add those. We have a couple of minutes left with our guests. And I don't know if we want to just mention that our next episode is our final episode of NMWA xChange, at least for now. We're going to be going on a hiatus as we reopen and refocus our energy on live programming. But we're really excited next month to welcome several of our collaborators at an organization called Smarty Pants. And I'll let Ginny talk a little bit more about that organization and the project that she's been working on.
Yeah, so before I talk about that quickly, I just wanted to note for our viewers who are familiar with the old space at NMWA, this exhibition, Holding Ground, is going to be on the 4th floor where the library was formerly located and will be located again, but we have a lot more exhibition space on the 4th floor now. So the space where this show is going to be is amazing. I've seen it. It's great. It's right outside the entrance to the LRC, which is very fitting. So we're really looking forward to getting that ready for everyone. Yeah, so please join us next time, Tuesday, September 12th, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be chatting with the folks from Smarty Pants, which is a film production company based in New York. And we have been working with them for over a year now to produce a series of short films on artists in our collection that will be screened here at the museum. And these are short films, about 3 to 4 minutes each. And we're designing this kind of immersive installation theater for the viewing of these films. They'll also be available online for people to check out. So we're really, really excited to speak to the team who you see here. Moret is the director of the project, Chelsea is a producer, and Kaya is a producer and writer that's worked on the project. So yeah, it'll be a nice little teaser right before we reopen and you can see the films in person.
Thanks, Ginny. Yeah, that's great. I just wanted to mention that Carrie said she said just to the host and panelists, she just mentioned that she's been really impressed by all of these pieces that will be in this exhibition and can't wait to see them in person. Thanks for sharing that, Carrie. And we're just so thrilled that everyone was able to join us today. And we do hope to see you in person when we're back at the museum. We do reopen to the general public on October 21st. So please do mark your calendars. Thank you to Elizabeth, to Lynora, to Colette, and to Adjoa for being with us today. And with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode. But if you have any other questions or comments, oh wait, you know what? I see a question in the Q&A. Hold on 1 second. Oh, this is a great question actually from Claudia, and I'll see if anyone in the room can help answer this question, Claudia. Can you tell us something about the conservation of your artist book collection? Can anyone speak to that?
Elizabeth, shall I try?
Yes, and then I'll add on.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to throw you for a loop.
Well, the entire collection is held in the Library and Research Center's Special Collections section. And the exciting thing about the reopening is that those storage areas are being, brought into the 21st century. So we'll have much better climate control and in general, better access to the books. I mean, one of the challenges of having 1,000 artist books is you can only show a few at a time. And again, that's another benefit of having better gallery space. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I'll add that along with having better access and better storage and just being able to be better stewards of it, going into the opening of the library, we're definitely trying to find ways to showcase the books more. So having storage areas that have good temperature control and knowing that it's safe for the time that it's put away so we can bring it out to the public is really exciting.
Thank you both for touching on that and trying to answer that question. I think it's also, for many of you probably know that works on paper are some of our most vulnerable objects in museum collections. So it's really exciting to know that sort of the storage is going to be more safe and secure, and also that we'll have more opportunities to actually see these books on view, and they've been incorporated into the permanent collection, as well as will take special place and have a special home in the library as well. I also want to mention, and I know it's not the same, we've talked a lot about the different formats that artist books take, and they take any number, you name it, they take that many formats, right? Every artist book is sort of unique in its own way. There are myriad formats. Some are one of a kind, as are these works in the show. Some are multiples. But what I love is that while actually during closure for the pandemic to begin with, the museum's education staff actually came up with some online exhibitions that touched on the library or the museum's collection of artist books. So I'm happy to share the link in the chat if you wanted to explore those. It's not the same as seeing them in person, but it does give you a sense of the kinds of formats that artists have been exploring in their artist books over time. So I'll add that to the chat. And yeah, anyone else want to add anything before we say our goodbyes? Thank you all so much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you all in October or before that if we get the chance. And Emily, thanks for joining us. Thank you to the other artists, part of Holding Ground, who joined us today. Elisa and Carrie, we're excited to see your work in person as well. And have a great day, everybody. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.